Alright, ready? Ah! Second time. No more skateboard. Oh, hi. I didn't see you there. My name's Charles Miller, and I'm in your psychology class with Professor Fells. I'm doing a project on the science of psychology and 3 major key concepts that I've picked from that chapter. We're going to start with gestalt psychology.
Okay, and first we're going to talk about the gestalt laws of psychology. Okay, so first we're going to talk about who, and the scientist most talked about, if you look it up, is going to be Max Wertheimer. It's the man on the left with the caterpillar reminiscent mustache. But also very instrumental in pushing this idea was Kurt Kafka and Wolfgang Kohler. The man in the middle is Kafka, and the one on the far right is Kohler. And they were very much so advocates of this idea and wrote about it very much. And they're credited with it too. So hopping over to the what of gestalt psychology, it's a concept derived from German psychologists we just talked about. And it's about how we perceive the world, like with psychological processes. So things like the senses and perception. Instead of breaking it down into little pieces or little structures, it analyzes it as one whole piece, one whole. So you don't see individual brushstrokes; you see the whole painting. There's an example of an EDM song right there. All those sounds put together sound like one whole song instead of electronical sounds. And in simpler terms, you're basically taking in everything. You're taking in everything in parts, but your mind processes it as a whole. So moving on over to the when and why of gestalt psychology. When it was created was a little bit after structuralism was introduced by Wilhelm Wundt. That's his idea, and it was kind of formulated as a response to it because they didn't agree with the way that structuralism analyzes things by breaking it down into pieces. They believe that it analyzes everything in a whole, which is why gestalt means whole in German. They felt that these psychological processes, like sense and perception, can't be split up and understood properly, which is a really good example by Professor Fells was the cell phones and the pieces of the cell phone, which was more valuable to a person. Like obviously the functioning put together cell phones are more valuable. So they had came up with a great quote that really sums it all up. The whole idea of gestalt psychology, it's the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and I think that really ties everything together.
So you think I have enough makeup on? Oh, hello fellow psychology students. My name is Charles Miller, and I brought you all to my office today to talk about the 7 current perspectives of psychology. And I have my friend here, Eleanor, to interview me about them. First, we're going to start out with the psychodynamic perspective.
Whose idea was it?
That's going to be Sigmund Freud, which is one of the most famous psychologists when psychology comes to mind.
And what does it say motivates human behavior?
It says that our unconscious mind motivates human behavior. So right off the bat, it's basically saying that our motivation is completely out of our control. It's all predetermined. We don't get any choice on what was going to happen because all of this is derived from our unconscious mind.
Can you elaborate on the unconscious?
The unconscious is basically part of the mind that's unavailable to introspection, so we can't really think about the thoughts that are in our unconscious. So a good example of that is a Freudian slip. If you're addicted to drinking or something like that, and you're trying to quit that habit, maybe when you're talking to someone about completely unrelated to drinking, the word champagne or the word drink slips out in your words, and you don't even notice it, and they do. That's like kind of an example of a Freudian slip, something in your unconscious slipping out.
And regarding the behavioral perspective, whose idea was that?
It's going to be Ivan Pavlov, a very Russian-looking gentleman, I think, with a very large bushy beard.
And what does it say motivates human behavior?
It says the associations we make motivate human behavior, or the environment more so. Actually, environment's a much better way of saying it. That's what I would write down. But the associations we make early on in life affect our behavior. So basically, an example that Professor Fells used is food and comfort. Early on in life, when we're like crying as a baby or even as a small child, a lot of times people will give their kids ice cream or a baby milk, and it'll satisfy that need that they're crying, and we make that association that food is comforting, which is a lot of people use that as use that kind of idea as a reason that people are, some people have become obese more so today, is because we make an association with comfort and food, and we should only be given food when we're hungry, is what some people say.
And whose idea was the humanistic perspective?
It's going to be Abraham Maslow.
And what does it say motivates human behavior?
It says that individuals motivate their own human behavior. So basically, we all have our own free will, which one that I very agree with, because I mean, free will is like one of the most kind of prevalent things for a human. They have that very free will. That's one part of our mind that's very different from other things. So, yeah.
And what is the hierarchy of needs?
The hierarchy of needs is a pyramid, and basically when you're analyzing something with a humanistic perspective, that's what you use. So, say if you're analyzing someone that robbed a bank or is like a criminal, you would use the hierarchy of needs. Like, what is he satisfying by doing this kind of activity with his free will?
And regarding the cognitive perspective, what does it say motivates human behavior?
It says that thoughts motivate our behavior. So we're very much so like a computer is the analogy I would use. So when we hear something, we process it, it goes through our mind, like the different circuitry and everything. It goes to our, I don't know, quad-core processor in our brain, super fast with a terabyte of memory. And then it comes out like a function. Like you put something in and you get something out of it.
And what does the biopsychological perspective say motivates human behavior?
It says that our biology motivates human behavior. So to put that into simpler terms is anything in our body. So like our genes, our hormones, disease, syndromes, heredity, brain damage, things that happen to our body is what affect our behavior. So like if you were analyzing something with the biopsychological perspective, if we're talking about a man that he was very older in his life and was not attracted to young girls for his whole life, was very normal sexually, and went to his doctor saying he was attracted to very young girls later on in his life, and he didn't know why. He didn't have those tendencies before, and it turns out that he actually had a tumor pressing on the sexual instinct part of his brain. It was pressing on that, and once it was removed, it was no longer there.
And regarding the evolutionary perspective, what does it say motivates human behavior?
It says that our need to adapt, reproduce, and survive motivates human behavior. So it's a very, very Darwinistic view of what our motivation is, a very Darwinistic view of human behavior. It also says that, like, it basically tries to analyze all the character traits that all humans share and why we engage in beneficial activity or activity that people wouldn't see as beneficial, like why we lie, are scared of things, or why we commit infidelity. A lot of people would use the evolutionary perspective to analyze those kind of things, like why are men more likely to forgive emotional infidelity and why are women more likely to forgive physical infidelity and things like that.
And regarding the sociocultural perspective, what does that say motivates human behavior?
It says that the culture and society we were raised in motivates human behavior. So basically, where we were, the people around us, not just your parents, but everything around you, like the community you grew up in, like how nice it was, if it was more affluent or if it was more low income. You could maybe analyze, a lot of people say that New Yorkers are like rude or like more mean so than other people. Actually, LA is the most mean city, actually by statistic, if you wanted to know. But if we were going to analyze one of those people, we could analyze them by the culture they came up in. And so if you're a New Yorker, you live in a very busy society, which is very cutthroat, very, very much so business orientated. Like there's a lot of competition. And because there's so many people and so many things to pay attention to, I feel like as like they have less time for certain things and less tolerance for people, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's what their society has taught them, being a New Yorker and things like that. So when you approach a New Yorker and ask them for the time, sometimes they won't even talk to you because they're just so busy. They're like, I'm doing what I'm doing. This is New York. There's 200 million people, however many. There's not really that many people, but this is an over-exaggeration. But there's that many people, and they're just trying to get that one thing done for them. And that's what that culture has taught them. And that's going to end our talk about the 7 current perspectives.
Lastly, we're going to talk about how to apply the scientific method. And you're going to start off with a question, or with an observation, actually. So you're going to observe an object, and from there you're going to begin to make a rational question. And there shouldn't be any hunches like 4 cups of coffee make you smarter. or anything like that. It has to be rational and based on other theories, so you know that it is going to be testable. So after that, you're going to move on to research, and they talked about research methods in the lecture, like observable research, descriptive research, and finding relations between things. So you begin to operationalize that info, and then you make a hypothesis. So a hypothesis is going to be like a testable prediction and an answer to that question. Say violent video games cause violent behavior. Say that's your hypothesis. From there, you're going to conduct a experiment manipulating that variable, which is violent video games, to see if it has a cause and effect relationship with violent behavior, and then you're going to take that data and make your conclusion so other scientists can test that data.